Hi, welcome to Dragonblade Authors Unplugged. I'm so excited to be here with Meara, Platt, and Anne Rollins this week. Ladies, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, no problem.
Pleasure.
So it's actually a big release week for Dragonblade. We had 4 releases this week. We're going to start with the Melissa Kendall's book, which is book 2 in the Seductive Sleuths, and it's Mentor to the Marquess. I think Marquess is the right way to say that. I always stumble over that one. But it's book 2 in that series, and I'll make sure I pop the comment in the link in the or pop the link in the comment so you can grab it if you haven't gotten it already. Melissa's going to join us at another time in the future. So we're going to roll right on and do Anne's book first, which is Discovery at Dogwood Cottage, and it is also a book 2, and it's book 2 in the Beaumont series. Can you tell us about that one, Anne?
So this one is a marriage of convenience between friends. The premise of the book is that the male lead's uncle offers to give a fortune and his old vacation home to whichever one of his nephews marries first. The idea being that he's annoyed. He's got these nephews and none of them are marrying and having grandnephews and so on like that. So he's trying to inspire them to do that. And the lead, George, is initially like, well, I don't know anyone I could marry. And then he visits his sister and she's like, why don't you marry Belle, who's his childhood friend and the female lead? So it's got both some childhood friends trope and the marriage of convenience, which I don't know that you often see those two together. Often marriage of convenience is between strangers, and this is a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when we get childhood friends because there's a shared intimacy that starts out that lets you go that much deeper when you get into the story.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is book 2 in the series?
Yes. So this series, Beaumont Secrets, they're romances, but they have like a little pinch of mystery. Sometimes I describe them as like 2 parts romance, 1 part mystery, to try to make so that people don't get it thinking it's going to be all historical, cozy mystery, because the romance really does take center stage. But in this book, the mystery concerns the fact that somebody keeps trying to break into their house in search of the treasure that people say has hidden in the house. So you've got a legend of buried treasure and someone who's desperately trying to break in to get it.
Awesome. And how many more books do we have in the series?
2 more. The 3rd one is Incident at Ingleton. And then the 4th one I am currently working on now. It involves a poisoning case. That's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, I get to read about arsenic, so that's fun.
I bet your search history looks great.
Oh yeah. How quickly do you die of arsenic poisoning?
Awesome. Well, I'm glad we have more to look forward to. And these are part of Dragonblade's Sweet Dreams line, which means
yes, that is correct.
That they're on this side of the bedroom door. You go on the other side for that.
Yes, that is correct. So it's like I call them kissing only.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about Dragonblade is that we have different lines and different heat levels. So you can read whatever you want and know going into it what it's going to be. If you watch our social media here recently, we've started adding flags to our new covers that indicates the line. You can always check on the Dragonblade main page, and Juliana has posted on our Facebook page the definitions of each line so that you'll be able to find the books at the heat level that you want to read at.
Yeah.
So the next book that released this week is Meara's book, and it's Moonlight and the Duke, and it's book 2, another book 2 in the Silver Duke series. Can you tell us about this one?
Okay. Yes. This is it's not a marriage of convenience, but it is. It's not like childhood friends because there's actually an age gap between the hero, who's a Silver Duke. So he's in his 40s. Connor is in his 40s, just graying at the temples, as you can see my gray roots. And but he's very handsome and quite fit, of course. And Eden she's a spinster now. She's approaching her, nearing 30, but had a very unhappy childhood in that her parents were constantly fighting. They hated each other. There was always constant turmoil. So as she grew up and she's well off, there's no need for her. She's just been afraid to have a marriage like her family has. Now, she and Connor have been neighbors all along, and the trajectory of his life went a little bit, of he married in his 20s, mid 20s, and had his children. His wife passed away, and his mother, who's meddlesome, the Dowager Duchess, right? So he's got 3 adorable but extremely opinionated children, a meddlesome mother.
We called them heathens in the blurb.
Yes, the little heathens. And they're always running off, always getting into trouble. But they love Eden. And, as the mother is pressuring, as their grandmother is pressuring, Connor to remarry, he doesn't want to do it. He just felt that first marriage was, it was a failed marriage, except that he adores his children, but the marriage itself was not good. He's in no rush. But meanwhile, the mother, she's just invited all of these debutantes to, and families to a party. These are all the things, and he's just looking. There's like too big an age difference. Mm-hmm. He can't, he's not interested in them. But meanwhile, with all this going on, the children, who are little heathens, they've just lost another nanny. They've chased off another governess. And so Connor is desperate to have them taken care of. And he turns to Eden to see, can you help me out? So, of course, as she helps him out, they're just all drawn closer. And he's realizing all of a sudden, wow, when did she become so beautiful? But, and meanwhile, she wears these owlish little spectacles and stuff.
Oh, love
it. He slowly starts to realize that this woman that he's known since she was a baby practically is now, grown up and beautiful. And, but also what happens at the party is that she meets somebody who is genuinely interested in her. So all of a sudden, Connor has to come to the realization that, yes, he loves her, and yes, he's ready to take that second step to marry her. So awesome. It's fun. It's a fun story, as with, that's like my brand kind of. There's always chaos. It's humorous, it's light, it's, it's always stuff. They finally get to their happily ever after.
Is this a He Falls First?
And that's it. And it's just the first book was Cherish and the Duke, and the next book will be. Sorry, I think I'm losing the connection here.
No, we can still hear you. Can you hear us?
Evelyn, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, okay. Yeah.
You're okay, Meara. Keep going.
All right. I'll keep talking because I think I'm losing you.
We can hear you.
All right. Yeah. So the third book will be The Third Friend. The third book is The Third Friend, who's this hunky, very brash Scot who's going to fall in love with this runaway bride who happens to just be. He comes home drunk one day and finds her in his hotel room bed. So we'll have fun with those books.
It sounds like fun. That sounds like fun. How many more do we get in the series? Oh, Meara, I don't think Meara can hear us. I'm gonna. Would you pop out and try?
I think I'm losing you, Evelyn. I'm sorry. I'm screwing this up.
That's okay. That's okay. That was more than enough. That was more than enough to make me want to read the book.
There will be 3 more books after this.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I'm gonna pop.
Yeah, we're losing the connection. So well,
Yeah.
we wait to see if Meara can come if Meara can come back. And can we talk a little bit about how you go about writing? Are you a pantser or a plotter, or do you do the whole series ahead of time? How do you structure your books and your thought process?
I started off as a pantser, like a complete pantser. Well, not complete. I would know how it was going to end, and I would know how it began, and I had to figure out how it got through the middle to the end. Right. So that's how I used to do it, and in some ways, that's still the most fun because you get to discover as you go. But when I had books that I knew I had to finish by a deadline, I was like, that's not going to work. So for those, I did like an 18-point or a 15-point outline. And I found some GMC goal, motivation, character charts and filled them out for the lead characters. I never used to do those kinds of pre-planning things, but I did find them helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something we don't talk about often enough, that when you're writing the book and you know exactly where things are going to go, there's not that kind of sparkly bit that there is when you're discovering the plot as you go along.
It's sometimes it's not as fun. I mean, you're like, I know I have to write this, but
trying not to say that out loud, but
yeah.
Yeah, because there's something also about that 3/4 point where you get 3/4 of the way through, you know how it's going to go, and then
yeah,
you got to be able to show it to everybody else too.
Mm-hmm.
So, Meara, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah, now you're good.
Hot dog. So the only thing I think we missed was how many books are left in the series.
Well, we just signed on for 3 more books, so there'll be 3 more coming up. And they are going to be a lot of fun. So.
I love a Silver Duke. I love an age gap romance, but I really love a Silver Duke.
Yeah. Oh, and they're so hunky. They're just they've got that dash of silver at the temples, and they're just they should have it all together, and they basically do have it all together, except that they still mess up their love life.
Yeah, and then you get to have the heroine come along and like show them how exactly off kilter they are, which is really fun to watch. So
yes,
awesome.
And not that it matters, but it would be more likely for a duke to be in his 40s or 50s anyway, because he doesn't inherit until his father passes away. Yeah. Like I know historical romance has tons of young dukes running around, but
we got a lot of dukes all over. We got dukes all over the place.
I know. But in some ways you could be like, well, look, this is a little more realistic.
Yeah, awesome. Meara, while you were popping out, Anne was telling us about her writing process and about plotting and pantsing. Can you remind us of the way you do your books? I know we've talked about it before, but
remind
us about how it goes for you.
I'm very much a pantser. I do minimal plotting, but I'm a complete pantser because the plotting part is where I establish my characters. Those I have to know, because I do have to know the hero, his foibles and his strengths, and the heroine, her foibles and strengths, and how they clash and how they meld. And but after that, I let them do what they're going to do, and they'll talk to me. They'll tell me what they want to do, and that's it. That's really well. Of course, I do know in terms of the story arc. I know that I do want to have them. If there's going to be danger, the danger is going to be put in a particular part. And the real peril will come at closer to the end, and then and when they're going to kiss. But they'll tell me when they want to kiss. My heroes, they're alphas. They know their own minds for the most part. So they see the girl, they want to kiss her. So that's the given. It's just a matter of when the opportunity arises.
So there was talk in the Dragonblade author loop earlier this week about what happens when you write yourself into a place where you have to write yourself back out again. And I was wondering if that happened to either of you, and if you had a way, especially if you're not plotting heavily, where you realize this hasn't gone exactly the way I need it to get to the end point, and how you work your way out of it.
That hasn't happened to me yet with something that I had to finish. Like, so historically, if I've gotten to a point where I'm like, I don't know what's going on, I might set it aside and work on something else. But again, when you have something under deadline and you're like, okay, I have to finish this, I was like reading some of those answers too, like just in case I ever needed to know.
I saw that, and I find that really read myself in whole too often. If it does happen, I'll go back and I'll say, well, there may be that I have to inject another character in there to either heighten the conflict or, just to add some level of or comic relief or whatever. And that's how I usually write through it. I try to avoid hitting those of like, oh no, I'm done. Go now. Where do I?
Yeah, that breaking tension, I think it's a big deal, and having an extra character can do that. Some of the authors were talking about bringing kids and dogs, and I think that's helpful. I also think sometimes you get stuck because the reader can't know everything that's going on internally. Like, I mean, you can't. It's not realistic to be able to tell them everything, and so you have to figure out a way to show what's going on without actually coming out and saying it. I think it's really easy to get twisted up that way. Meara, can you hear us? I don't think she can. I think we lost her again. So I'm just gonna message real quick.
Okay.
For everybody watching, I appreciate you.
Evelyn, I'm sorry. There's a storm going on outside, and I keep losing the connection.
That's okay. I'm always amazed. I was going to say, I appreciate everybody who watches us being patient with us, dealing with the technology kind of thing. I'm always amazed that we can do it because we have authors all over the world, literally all over the world. And anytime we can get together and talk and it actually works, it's like, it's like, it tickles me to no end.
Yeah.
It's like, how often does that happen? Meara, if you can't hear us still, she's gone. Hopefully she'll come back. And when you set out to do a series, which I know is different when you're just doing the series versus when you're doing a series under contract, how do you figure out what you want to write about? How do you figure out how to make it big enough? Because it's one thing to do the goal motivation conflict boxes for a book, but to get it to carry across the series.
I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah. For now.
Yeah, this is my double thumbs up. It's better than one thumbs up. Yeah.
Well, so to answer the question, sometimes it's still like pantsing, in that in the first book of this quartet, there's a secondary character whose plot line is not fully resolved. So then later books have to reference that. And the book that I'm working on now will give finally full resolution for that. And that makes a kind of through line about these characters. They all know each other. They're intermarried with each other. They go to house parties with each other and so on. So characters keep popping in and out, but there's a couple of characters in particular who you have to find out what happens to them. You have to read the next book.
Well, and I love that when that happens, when the characters come in and now all of a sudden I'm invested in them and it's not even their book. So
it's not.
for when it becomes theirs. Awesome. Have you ever wanted to write in a different time period than you write in?
I have thought about writing in Victorian rather than Regency because I know a lot about the Victorian period. Yeah, I study Victorian literature in my day job.
Cool.
I'm a Victorianist. So
really, I did not know that was a thing.
Yes.
Oh, you have to tell us what that is because I did not know that was a thing.
Okay, so it just means I'm an English professor who specializes in Victorian literature.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And so I like learning about the material culture too. One of the reasons I haven't done a Victorian series or a Victorian book yet is, and this is going to sound really silly, I don't like the clothing nearly as much as I like the Regency clothing. I love the Regency Empire dresses.
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of a lot of the Victorian clothing, with the bustles and the hoop skirts and so on. But there are certain political events that happened later in the 19th century, and I have sometimes thought about that. There's an idea I'm kicking around now that might take place in the 1850s. So I would have to do a lot of research in the clothing and culture.
Do you find yourself having to fight against what you know from your day job versus writing in the time period, writing in the Regency period, and making sure that you're not stepping out of where it would be historically?
There's a lot of times when I have to Google, when did this word show up, or when was this invented? Because even for things like a pencil, I don't necessarily know, was it available, which it was, but
Right.
I do a lot of that.
Right. Awesome. Meara, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Okay.
Much better now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to practice polls. So the question that I asked Anne, and we found out she's a Victorianist, which I did not even know was a thing. So that was a whole new thing. Have you ever thought about writing in a different time period than you do?
I've thought about it, and I've never been able to do it. My brain is just hardwired for that historical, Regency, Victorian era. And I just love it. I love writing in it. And when I try to write outside of it, my characters just shoot me right back into the time period. They don't want a different time period. So yeah.
You've stretched a little bit and done not full on paranormal, but a little bit of paranormal kind of flavored to your work too. Has that something that been is that a love of yours in either reading or writing?
Oh yes. First of all, I love dragons. I grew up reading all of those the dragon shifter story, dragon stories and stuff, and so that's why the Dark Garden series of mine is filled with dragon shifters and demons and dragon lords and fairies and battle of the worlds, and I love that. Yeah, so that was a nice stretch, but again. My hero and heroine, the time period was Regency. It all took place in the Lake District, Regency era.
Oh, wow. Dragons in the Lake District.
Oh, yes. And they're just flying all around. And there's, in the Lake District, there's like a little hill, or it's like a little mound, not quite a mountain, called Friar's Crag. And I turned that one into like the Red Mountain where all the demons come out of. And
goodness.
And then in there's a vicarage there with a lovely bluebell garden, and that's the portal for the fairies to come through time and stuff. And I love those books. I'll get around to writing another one. I think I'd love to write another one. So,
well, in the meantime, the Dark Garden series is available, and it's available in Kindle Unlimited, so you can grab it and read it if you haven't read it yet. If you have a dragon fae hankering. Awesome. I think as lots of us do. I just finished Rebecca Yarros. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. The Fourth Wing. I read both books back to back on the airplanes back and forth from Vegas. So.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm loving dragons right now.
Okay, yeah. Well, Paula Quinn also, who writes for Dragonblade as well. She has. I think we were both writing our dragons around the same time.
Yeah,
I love that hers are great too.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple of other writers who do. There's actually a lot of people writing dragons in the Regency, and it's kind of fascinating to me. Like, why dragons? I don't know.
I think it's because I was arguing with my middle kiddo because we have similar reading tastes. So as soon as I started reading this, I said, you got to try this. You're gonna love this. His reading fluency isn't great. It's never been great. So he listens to audiobooks. But he was like, it has to be 2-legged dragons because 4-legged dragons don't make sense, because then you have 6 limbs and not 8 limbs, and that only works if you're bugs. It doesn't work if you're men. I think part of the lure of the dragon is that you can kind of go it's across cultures, and so you can kind of go, well, maybe there were, like there were dinosaurs. Why couldn't there have been dragons? Wouldn't you just lost a couple wings? It's like, it seems like It seems plausible. It makes it that willing suspension of disbelief thing really, really easy to grab onto. So.
Yeah, very much. And when they write believable worlds, you'd love to get immersed in those. So
yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about historical romance too, is that you're recreating a world that existed. And for those of us who were less than stellar at history in school, I didn't want to not like it. I just didn't. Like the idea of being able to be immersed in this world and get a different understanding of how people lived and what their options were. And, even, and when you were talking about liking Regency Empire dresses and stuff better, like when you figure out what they had to go through to get dressed, all the undergarments, all the structure, like everything that goes on, it is like a significant amount of world building. And I love being able to trust an author to show me, like what actually was, so that I can really believe it. So, and I know you write sweet, and Meara, you write steamier.
yeah.
Do you ever find yourself crossing over, or is that your comfort place, or is that
I have written steamy before. I like both of them. I think what I like about sweet is that in some ways, for some stories and some characters, it's easier to tell a sweet romance, because if you're writing about a time period that frowned on premarital sex, then and your characters, if they care about that, which some of them don't, then you have to come up with situations where they could have a steamy scene. And sometimes it ends up meaning they have to get married earlier in the book to get to that. And if you're doing sweet or closed door, you don't have to worry about that. They can just end up engaged at the end of the book and leave all of that out of it. It's a little more challenging when it's a marriage of convenience, as the Dogwood Cottage is, because there is like, well, I totally could have written this as a steamy romance, but it's part of this line, so I didn't.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. The idea of situations. I think it was Kathleen Ayers who said, "Deflowering virgins on the daily is exhausting," because there are so few opportunities, where you can cross those lines. Even though we knew, because people always cross them, that they did cross them then too.
I read somewhere that as many as a third of brides were pregnant on their wedding day in the year 1800.
Oh my goodness.
They learned this by comparing the wedding record in a church with the baptism record of the babies. And they'd have these babies baptized, 6 months after the wedding. And those were not all premature babies, right?
Yeah, I have to say that's one of the things, rarely, but every once in a while, if you see a review and they said, oh, there's too much. I mean, not that my stories are relatively sweet, at least the heroines are very sweet and the romance is very sweet. And there is a little bit of steam, but it usually comes at the end once they're committed, or, they have the commitment, or they're married or about to be married, but, and then sometimes there's always a reader who wants that very proper, but that really was not how it was back then. Maybe later in the 1850s with Victoria, with Queen Victoria. But even then, I really think that human nature is human nature.
It's a powerful force, man.
Yeah, it does not change. Yeah, they're gonna have, the guys are gonna want the ladies, and the ladies are gonna find them hard to resist. So stuff's gonna happen. But when I write my novellas, those are always sweet. I just find it easier, and it's just
there's not enough time.
Yeah,
it's not enough time to develop the romance, and to take it fully, and also I know there's just something very nice about, and I tried to keep the novellas. They're lighter, they're sweeter, and they don't need to be rushed. It doesn't feel rushed. Like they'll end with that commitment or just that kiss, and it works. It works.
I had a writer friend once who said that she wants all of the sizzle before she gets to the steak. It's like, and I like that idea, because there's so much you can do as an author with that chemistry, and I think that there's something really compelling about that. you know, like when you can tell that they're really falling in love on the page, and then you get to fall in love on the page with them. I think as a reader is like, oh, I love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of my favorite things to do is like, you know, I love all my heroines and heroes, but every once in a while, you know, like several times it's come up where it's like the hero comes into my head and he is just like on fire. You cannot, you know, I feel it as I'm typing them. He's like, just like he shows up and it's like those pages are burning. So, and I love that. It's just, it's great. And, you know, he doesn't have to do anything. He's not going to do anything with the heroine yet, but it's like, you feel it and you know, and it's like, it's fun. I enjoy writing that.
Yeah. I love that feeling of being in somebody else's head too, you know, and it feels like they're driving you through the story. That's awesome. Well, ladies, we have run out of time. It was great to talk to you today. I want to make sure that I mentioned Sherry Ewing's book, which is The Night of Mayhem, and it's book 4 in the Knights of Anarchy. It's medieval. And so I will make sure I pop the link to her book and also to Melissa's book in the comments with your books. So you can grab them if you haven't gotten them already. I'm going to say the same thing I do every week because it's true every week. Dragonblade books are the best deal on pre-order and release. You want to make sure you grab them then. If you can't, you can always read in Kindle Unlimited. So, ladies, thanks so much for taking the time. It was